So a couple of years ago, we were talking about bands doing two-part albums. You know, Five Finger Death Punch did it, so did Stone Sour. You know, Coheed and Cambria's on like part 72 or whatever the fuck. They're doing prequels and sequels to prequels and prequels to prequels to make the pre-prequel three-part. The Singularity Part 1, Neohumanity. This is going to be like fucking Lord of the Rings, only in 2030. Alright, let's be real about this, actually. This was something that was announced, that it was the intention was for this to be a three-part series from Symmetry, and that this was going to explore the idea of artificial intelligence in the future, and transhumanism, which has been a topic that's been on the rise ever since its original founding or naming in the 1950s. The 1980s saw a large boom in this, and it's again something that comes up at scientific conventions and everything. It's transforming our intelligence, or artificial intelligence, or artificial heightening powers into human beings or into robots, particularly to give us enhanced abilities, give us the abilities to do things that we can't do, which, for example, would mean that I could get some transhuman elements that would make my knees, my hips, my back not hurt and not have to go to doctors. It's kind of selfish. Could also do it where I can record, 200 album reviews a day. Be the most popular and biggest dick on the internet. So let's talk about this. 8 tracks long, 43 minutes in length. So it's not as though this is an idea that they're necessarily trying to overpopulate with music. They're not trying to overpopulate it with 70 minutes to get you started. These are not... I really don't think that these are going to be lengthy albums. And this part is more trying to explain the generalized concept and get everything together and recognize that there are two types of people here. There are the types of people who are for this idea, and that are for the idea of using artificial intelligence and this whole transhumanism idea, and then there are those who are not, or just trying to use it for their own gain as opposed to thinking of all of society. And isn't that really just a perfect metaphor for what it really is? Isn't that just a perfect metaphor? Because that always seems to be the debate. It always seems to be relevance to society and then relevance to the 2 or 3 people that just want it for themselves. It's a weird way to parallel, and a nice way to really bring human nature into this in almost like a third fashion, with the first being whether or not this is moral, the second being whether or not this is a good idea, and then the third being who the fuck should get it. I like this album for one reason, and one reason alone. I like the composition. Production duties were all handled by Per, their guitar player. And damn, he did a really good job. And there have been a couple reviews lately that I've talked to you guys, and I've said that bands these days tend to really sell themselves short whenever it comes to some instrumental passages, some soloing passages and things like that. It definitely seems like a very vocal-centered era. This is not true of this album. There are solos aplenty, there's great instrumentalization, there's beautiful, beautiful context. Not to mention, the flow of this album definitely gives it that storybook feel. It gives you that futuristic sci-fi novel idea, and you really kind of go into each track wanting to hear more and more about this. Now, you're thinking 8 tracks, I mean... what? Well, we have a track that's over 10 minutes in length, we have another one that's over 8 minutes in length, and both of these are kind of acting like the bookends, with the first track on this album, which is less than a minute, acting more so as an introduction, kind of letting you know what's going on, what world that you're being transported to. However, with tracks 2 and track 8, you're getting a bulk of the album. You're getting close to 19 minutes of the album, of the album's 43 minutes. So these are lengthy passages, but they are getting a lot of essential plot together, and they are also really wowing a lot of people with the musical context. These are not songs that really remain very stationary. These are songs that are able to kind of morph into things, and really the morph doesn't necessarily have to be the largest morph. It doesn't have to be blending from a death metal style all the way over to freaking opera progressive rock. No, it doesn't have to do that. Instead, it's just kind of a melodic death metal that is kind of flip-flopping a bit with a grand scheme progressive metal that has a little bit of technicality thrown in there. The best way that I can describe it is what would happen if Edge of Sanity's music and Nightingale's music, these are both Dan Swano projects, fused together and essentially had a child. Because Nightingale is, of course, more of the clean singing, the clean song, and the clean philosophy, a very beautiful, very prog-centered idea, whereas Edge of Sanity is, of course, death metal with a progressive scope, because it's epic, because it has just, think of Crimson and Crimson 2. There's a pair of classic reviews I should do one day in the future. But you fuse those two together and you get what Scar Symmetry is doing, only you throw in a futuristic edge, a futuristic theme. Limits to Infinity I have to talk about, which is track 3 on the album, because the chorus almost sounds like what would happen if Journey was alive in 2030 and we're in Scar Symmetry. It was really cool. The chorus of this is a clean sung passage that definitely reminds me of that old Journey sound, that big choral element, that big chorus element that they have on some of their vocals, and it's just really, really neat to draw that kind of conclusion and to draw that sort of comparison. By the way, if you think that Journey is lame, if you think that Journey is retarded, if you think Journey sucks, look outside of the singles and you're going to find that they're a hell of a band. That's your homework assignment for the day, aside from listening to this album. Yeah, listen to this album. Definitely do it. 88 out of 100. That's the second big score today, I think. Something. It's a big score, but it's because it's a great album. Scar Symmetry has pacing down beautifully. They have context down beautifully. And the songwriting is definitely on its way up. Not that these guys couldn't songwrite before, because they could. This is just something that has taken it to that next level. Because whenever you decide to take on a double or triple album idea with a big theme like that, you need to have stuff that's going to keep the audience's attention, aside from just the story. The music has to also be a guide. They did that. That's what I mean that their songwriting has really gotten to the top. Because they were able to do great things beforehand, they were able to tell stories beforehand, but now they're able to take a scope, or a theme rather, and scope it out for 3 albums. And on the first album, it feels like the pacing, the setup, the punch, everything to it is beautifully laid out. The groundwork is there. Now we just have to get the other 2 albums to see how the complete thing flows together. What did you guys think about this album? I know you guys have been clamoring for me to review this. What do you think? What do you know? Let me know in the comments below. For the record, I did not mean for that to rhyme.